What happens in an actual training camp when a fighter is at a very high level of boxing and they are trying to get to the next level? So, this is what makes it so compelling when you're learning the game of boxing, especially if you're a young trainer and you're learning the ins and outs. So, back at the turn of the century, we were preparing for a fighter. And so we had been at one of the boxing events. And in this event, this guy was literally boxing the lights off of this kid. And right before we were going to go into the fight, because we knew by round 6 that this guy was going to win. So it was going to be a 10-round fight. So by the 7th round, it was literally a one-sided fight. Maybe the guy won 2 rounds, and those rounds were good rounds. But one thing that I realized during this fight is that my the individual the individual who was taking part in this thing, um oh, let me see, let me take this off, let me catch you guys up. And yes, the individual that was taking part in this, he was swifty and very sharp. And guess what? He was a southpaw too. So the fact that he was a southpaw, it really made it tough. And with that being said, I was like, man, how do we strategize? Because at that point in time, I was just young in the game and I didn't really understand how tough it was to go up against the southpaw if you did not know particular things. So what happened was, as the fight was going, my mentor looked at me and said, "All right, little cuz, let's go." And that's how he used to speak. He used to talk in this very dark, deep, raspy voice. And I was like, "What do you mean? We got to finish watching this guy." He said, "I already know I've seen what I needed to see." So I was thinking, it's still like 2 rounds left to go. And he said, "Let me tell you something right quick." He said, "You see this kid?" And so the guy was boxing. I'm telling you, he looked like Zab Judah. So he's throwing shots and he's moving his head off the line. And I was like, okay. Every time the other kid would throw a shot, the guy deflected it really well. Now, those 2 rounds that he didn't win, he was more stationary. So I was thinking, what could he tell me? Because at that point in time, I thought I was a boxing wizard. I used to get around my friends and I used to watch the fights and I used to always think that these guys were, they were on their games. And when it came down to me picking fights, I always picked the right fighters. I just knew more about boxing, but this wasn't about me at that time. I was in professional fighting. Prize fighting is different. So he looked at me and tapped me on the shoulder. His 345-pound hand, boom, hit me on the chest and said, "You see that man right there in the ring? Now look down at his feet." And he said, "What do you see?" I said, "He's in a southpaw stance, but he does have the outside lane." Because we all know if you're boxing a southpaw and you're a conventional fighter, whoever's foot has the outside lane has the best opportunity for the straight shot, which is either the straight left or the straight right coming from a conventional stance. So I did know that much. And I said, "He's postured right." He said, "But look at his front toe." And I was like, "Okay." What he said, "His front toe is raised. He's not a real southpaw." And I was like, how in the hell do you know that? Because when you're boxing, you're either boxing off of your back feet or your front feet. And if you're really in a stance, your weight is on your front feet. And when the guy was boxing the kid's lights out, there was no telltale sign. But when he planted his feet and he did not have success in those rounds because he was planted, The telltale sign to my mentor knew then that he wasn't a real southpaw. So all we have to do is get him uncomfortable and turn him. That's when I knew at that moment, as much as I thought I knew, I didn't know shit about boxing. There's no way I could have competed against these guys who we call the powers that be, the downline from the trophy case of boxing, the Mount Rushmore. That's what is so unique. The level of understanding of a skill that you get to embody, you get to learn from. And I'm thinking at that time, I'm getting lucky, so lucky to get it from a place that no one's thinking of these kind of things. I've never heard that before then, and I never heard it since then because there's levels to boxing. And this is why you're going to learn directly right now how we make boxing simple, the most complicated sport that there is in the world to learn. We've made it simple. And we're going to break down the Cruz fight. We're going to break down the Jared Anderson fight. And we're going to break down the Terrence Crawford fight. What those guys did wrong, what they could have done, and where the corners messed up. So we're going to play 20 seconds of each one of those fights. Why? It's because I don't need as much footage as most of these individuals because I've had the opportunity to learn how to look at a fight. All I need is 12 seconds and I'll break your fighter down. And that's what we're going to teach you how to do. And that's why there's unique content directly in our Coach's Corner portal in the School of Boxing. There, you're going to learn things that you will not find on the internet. You can't search them because they don't exist. Because one thing I learned from Mount Olympus, the Mount Rushmore of boxing, is that you don't pass down these white hat things. These are diamonds. So this is the Cruz fight. So check this out. And then I'm going to break down exactly what this young man and his corner didn't do.